Imagine for a second that you're watching your neighbor's houses burn down, one after another. Flames everywhere, screaming, chaos. And while everyone else is frantically trying to put out fires, you're calmly sitting on your porch, counting the money they're paying you to store their valuables in your basement. Welcome to Switzerland. Here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Switzerland has turned neutrality into the most profitable business model in human history. While Europe tore itself apart twice in the 20th century, leaving 100 million dead, the Swiss sold weapons to both sides, stored Nazi gold, and emerged from both world wars significantly richer than when they started. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented history. Today, as Ukraine burns and Europe faces its worst energy crisis since 1945, Switzerland sits comfortably with a GDP per capita of $92,000, nearly double the European Union average. They have zero natural resources. They're completely landlocked. They import almost everything, and yet they're richer than almost everyone else on the planet. How? The answer isn't what you think. This isn't a story about chocolate and watches. This is a story about the darkest, most cynical, and most brilliant geopolitical strategy ever executed. Switzerland didn't stumble into prosperity, they engineered it. Through two world wars, the Cold War, countless regional conflicts, and every financial crisis of the last century, they perfected a formula that works every single time. Stay neutral. Protect everyone's money. Profit from everyone's wars. Today, we're dissecting the Swiss model and revealing why every major power on Earth secretly wishes they could do the same thing, but can't. Let's start with the biggest lie about Switzerland, that they're a, quote, zero country. They're not. Switzerland practices something called armed neutrality, which is a fancy way of saying, we won't attack you first, but if you touch us, we'll make you bleed so badly that it won't be worth it. This isn't peaceful neutrality. This is a porcupine strategy. Here's what that looks like in practice. Switzerland has 400,000 active and reserve soldiers for a population of just 8.7 million. That's 4.6% of their population ready for military service. For comparison, the United States, with its massive military, has only about 0.4% of its population in uniform. Switzerland spends approximately $5.6 billion annually on defense, which is roughly 0.7% of their GDP. But here's the kicker. They don't maintain a large standing army. Instead, every able-bodied Swiss male between 18 and 34 goes through military training and then keeps their rifle at home. Yes, you read that right. Switzerland has one of the highest rates of gun ownership in the world, about 2.3 million firearms for 8.7 million people. And it's because of mandatory military service. Now add the geography. Switzerland is 60% Alps, narrow valleys, mountain passes, natural choke points everywhere. During the Cold War, the Swiss military planted demolition charges on every single bridge, tunnel, and mountain pass leading into the country. Over 3,000 structures were rigged to blow. The message was clear: invade us and we'll collapse our entire infrastructure and turn our country into a death trap. This is what military strategists call scorched earth defense. If Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union wanted to invade Switzerland, they could. But the cost would be astronomical. You'd be fighting uphill in the snow against a heavily armed population that knows every inch of terrain, while your supply lines get destroyed behind you. The math doesn't work. During World War II, Hitler had detailed invasion plans for Switzerland. Operation Tannenbaum. He never executed them. Why? Because his generals told him it would cost 500,000 casualties minimum, take months, and tie down divisions he needed elsewhere. Switzerland's strategy worked perfectly. Make invasions so expensive that even the Nazis decided it wasn't worth it. And here's the darkest irony of all. While Europe was burning, Switzerland was busy being Europe's banker, its insurance company, and arms dealer. German companies like IG Farben had Swiss subsidiaries. Swiss banks held Nazi gold, including gold extracted from Holocaust victims. Swiss factories produced precision instruments for German weapons. They stayed neutral while profiting from genocide. Let that sink in. If you want to understand why Switzerland is rich, you don't look at their mountains. You look at their banks. Swiss banking secrecy laws date back to 1934, but the practice is much older. Here's how it works. Swiss banks don't ask questions. They don't report to foreign governments. And until very recently, they offered numbered accounts where even the bank employees didn't know who owned the money, just a number. This created the perfect money laundering machine. By 2008, Swiss banks managed approximately $2.7 trillion in offshore wealth, about 27% of all cross-border assets globally. To put that in perspective, Switzerland's entire GDP is only about $800 billion. They were managing wealth equivalent to 3.4 times their entire economy. Who uses Swiss banks? Everyone with something to hide. Dictators. Ferdinand Marcos, Philippines, stashed an estimated $658 million. Drug cartels. Pablo Escobar used Swiss accounts extensively. Corrupt politicians. Sani Abacha, Nigeria, hid $700 million. Tax evaders. Wealthy Americans hiding money from the IRS. War criminals. Nazi gold. Rwandan genocide funds, you name it. But here's where it gets really dark. Swiss banks don't just store money. They provide financial services that allow wealth to move invisibly across borders. They facilitate transactions. They provide loans backed by hidden assets. They help the wealthy avoid taxes in their home countries while investing globally. The system was so profitable that by 2013, Swiss banks employed over 195,000 people, about 2.2% of Switzerland's entire workforce, just in financial services. The sector contributed approximately 9.3% to Swiss GDP directly and much more indirectly. Now let's talk about the fees. Swiss banks charge premium rates, typically 0.5% to 1.5% annually on managed assets plus transaction fees. On $2.7 trillion, that's $13.5 billion to $40.5 billion in annual revenue just from wealth management. The banks pay taxes to Switzerland. The employees pay taxes. The money cycles through the Swiss economy. It's the world's most profitable service industry, storing other people's stolen money. After 2008, international pressure forced Switzerland to reform. The U.S. Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, FATCA, in 2010, and subsequent EU agreements cracked down on banking secrecy. Switzerland was forced to share information with foreign tax authorities. The era of absolute secrecy ended. But here's the thing. The damage was done, or rather the wealth was accumulated. Swiss banks still manage over $2 trillion in offshore assets today. They've just become more compliant with international law. The money is still there. The profits are still flowing. And Switzerland learned a valuable lesson. You can profit immensely from illegal activity, then reform just enough to avoid serious consequences and keep the wealth you accumulated. Think about that for a second. The entire Swiss economic model is built on being the world's vault for dirty money, then cleaning up just enough to stay respectable. You cannot make this stuff up. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this deep dive into how Switzerland turned neutrality into a business model, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. I put out one of these economic deep dives every week, and trust me, we're just getting started. Here's a question for the comments. Would you rather live in a country that's morally pure but poor, or morally compromised but rich? Switzerland chose option 2. Let me know what you'd pick. Let's talk about what Switzerland was actually doing during World War II. While maintaining this, quote, Switzerland provided critical services to Nazi Germany throughout the war. 1. Financial services. Swiss banks laundered gold stolen from occupied countries and Holocaust victims. The Nazis sent approximately 1.3 billion Swiss francs worth of gold to Switzerland during the war, about $389 million at 1940s exchange rates, equivalent to roughly $8 billion today when adjusted for inflation and gold price appreciation. 2. Industrial production. Swiss companies manufactured precision instruments, ball bearings, and machine tools essential for German weapons production. Companies like Oerlikon produced anti-aircraft guns. Brown Boveri supplied electrical equipment. 3. Transit rights. Switzerland allowed German freight trains to pass through the Gotthard Tunnel connecting northern Italy to Germany, a critical supply line. 4. Intelligence trading. Swiss intelligence services shared information with both Allied and Axis powers, playing all sides. But here's where it gets really cynical. Switzerland wasn't just helping Germany, they were also helping the Allies. Swiss companies sold to both sides. Swiss banks held accounts for American, British, and French clients, while simultaneously holding Nazi accounts. Swiss territory was used by spies from every nation. This is the ultimate hedge strategy. Profit from everyone, regardless of who wins. By the end of World War II, Switzerland's gold reserves had increased by 244%, from 2.59 billion Swiss francs in 1939 to 6.33 billion in 1945. Where did this gold come from? Largely from Nazi Germany, which paid for Swiss goods and services with gold looted from occupied countries and victims of the Holocaust. When the war ended and the Allies demanded Switzerland return the stolen gold, Switzerland negotiated. In the 1946 Washington Agreement, they agreed to pay 250 million Swiss francs, about $58 million, roughly 12% of what they'd received. They kept the rest. Let me repeat that. Switzerland kept 88% of the Nazi gold. Fast forward to the Cold War, and Switzerland did it again. They sold to both NATO and Warsaw Pact countries. Swiss banks held money for Soviet officials, American corporations, and everyone in between. Zurich became a neutral meeting ground where East and West could do business. During the Yugoslav wars of the 1990s, Serbian war criminals stashed money in Swiss accounts. During the Iraq War, Swiss companies sold equipment to Saddam Hussein. During every conflict from Libya to Syria, Swiss banks have been involved. The pattern never changes. War breaks out. Money flees to Switzerland. Switzerland provides services to all sides. Switzerland gets richer. And here's the kicker that nobody talks about. This strategy only works because Switzerland is small and militarily irrelevant. If Switzerland were a major power, they couldn't stay neutral. Major powers have interests, alliances, and enemies. Small countries can play all sides because nobody sees them as a real threat. Switzerland isn't peaceful. They're just too small to matter militarily, and that's exactly what makes them rich. Here's something most people don't know. Switzerland is one of the world's largest pharmaceutical exporters, despite having only 8.7 million people. How is this possible? The answer lies in what I call, quote, 8, a perfect storm of intellectual property protection, tax optimization, and regulatory arbitrage that's turned Switzerland into Big Pharma's favorite home. Let's look at the numbers. Switzerland's pharmaceutical sector exports approximately $105 billion worth of drugs annually. That's roughly 13% of Swiss GDP from just one industry. Major companies headquartered in Switzerland include Novartis, market cap approximately $190 billion. Roche, market cap approximately $270 billion. Lonza, major pharmaceutical manufacturer. Combined, these companies employ about 135,000 people globally, with roughly 45,000 in Switzerland itself. But here's the beautiful part. From Switzerland's perspective, these companies don't manufacture everything in Switzerland. They develop drugs in Switzerland, patent them in Switzerland, and route profits through Switzerland, but often produce them elsewhere where labor is cheaper. Why Switzerland? 3 reasons. 1. Intellectual property protection. Swiss patent law is extremely favorable to pharmaceutical companies. Patent terms, enforcement mechanisms, and legal frameworks protect drug monopolies aggressively. 2. Tax optimization. Switzerland's cantonal tax system allows companies to negotiate special rates. Some pharmaceutical companies pay effective tax rates as low as 11.5%, far below the rates in Germany, 30%, France, 32%, or the United States, 21% federal plus state. 3. Proximity to Europe. Switzerland sits in the heart of Europe with access to EU markets, but isn't bound by all EU regulations. It's regulatory arbitrage at its finest. Here's how the money flows. A drug is developed in Basel. The patent is filed in Switzerland. The drug is manufactured in India or China. It's sold globally at premium prices. The profits are routed back to Switzerland, where they're taxed at low rates. Let's take a concrete example. Roche's cancer drug, Herceptin, generated approximately $7 billion in annual sales at its peak. Roche is headquartered in Basel. Even though the drug might be manufactured in multiple countries and sold globally, a significant portion of the profits flow through Switzerland. The result? Switzerland's pharmaceutical sector contributed approximately 5.7% directly to Swiss GDP in 2022. But the indirect effects, banking services, legal services, real estate for wealthy executives, probably double that contribution. And here's the darkest irony. While the world debates drug pricing and access to medicines, Switzerland, a country of 8.7 million people, controls a significant portion of global pharmaceutical intellectual property. Drugs that cost $100,000 per year in the United States might cost $5 to manufacture, but Swiss patent law ensures those monopoly profits are protected. Switzerland didn't develop this model by accident. After World War II, as their banking secrecy came under scrutiny, they pivoted hard into pharmaceuticals and specialty manufacturing. They saw the future: high-value, knowledge-intensive industries with strong intellectual property protection. Banking secrets might eventually be exposed, but drug patents last 20 years and can be extended through various legal mechanisms. Let's talk about why Switzerland's model works in a world that increasingly rejects neutrality. During the Ukraine war, Europe faced a defining moment: sanction Russia or not? The EU, UK, and US imposed sweeping sanctions. Assets were frozen, Russian oligarchs' yachts were seized, SWIFT access was cut. Switzerland? They eventually joined sanctions, reluctantly, after massive international pressure. But here's what they didn't do. They didn't freeze all Russian assets immediately. They didn't shut down all Russian accounts. They moved slowly, carefully, preserving their reputation as a neutral safe haven. Why? Because Switzerland understands something fundamental about geopolitics. Every major power needs a neutral ground. Think about it. Where do American and Iranian diplomats meet? Switzerland. Where did the Iran nuclear deal get negotiated? Switzerland. Where do North Korean and Western officials have back-channel communications? Switzerland. Where do Russian oligarchs and Western businessmen maintain relationships despite sanctions? Switzerland. Switzerland isn't just a country. It's a neutral platform for all the conversations that can't happen officially. Geneva hosts more international organizations than any city except New York: the United Nations European Headquarters, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the International Committee of the Red Cross. This neutrality has a price tag. Switzerland contributes approximately $400 million annually to various UN programs and peace initiatives. They host conferences. They provide diplomatic facilities. They offer mediation services. But the return on investment is enormous. Every time a major geopolitical crisis emerges, Switzerland's importance increases. Money flows in. Diplomats arrive. International organizations expand. The Swiss franc strengthens. Compare Switzerland to Ireland or Singapore. Other small countries that have tried to position themselves as neutral financial hubs. Ireland is part of the EU and bound by EU foreign policy. Singapore is effectively aligned with the West due to security concerns about China. Neither can play all sides the way Switzerland does. Switzerland's geography helps. Landlocked in the heart of Europe, surrounded by NATO countries, but not part of NATO itself. Switzerland has access to European markets through bilateral agreements, but isn't bound by EU foreign policy. It's the geopolitical equivalent of being at every poker table, but never showing your cards. And here's the final twist. Even China, which increasingly presents itself as an alternative to Western dominance, needs Switzerland. Chinese companies invest in Switzerland. Chinese officials send their kids to Swiss schools. Chinese wealth managers use Swiss banks. Everyone, America, China, Russia, Europe, needs a place where the rules are predictable, the banks are secure, and nobody asks too many questions. Switzerland spent 500 years becoming that place. So where does Switzerland go from here? Future A, the transparent fortress. In this scenario, Switzerland continues its slow evolution toward transparency and compliance. Banking secrecy is dead. Tax information is shared automatically with foreign governments. Switzerland becomes a wealthy European country, prosperous but no longer exceptional. In this future, Switzerland's GDP per capita slowly converges toward the EU average. The special advantages fade. The premium Switzerland commands for discretion disappears. They remain wealthy, but more like Austria or Denmark than the unique financial fortress they were. This future is possible. International pressure is relentless. The era of absolute secrecy is over. Switzerland might just become another wealthy, boring European country. Future B, the digital vault. But there's another possibility. Switzerland pivots again. Just as they moved from banking to pharma, when banking secrecy cracked, they moved to crypto, data privacy, and digital assets. Switzerland is already positioning itself as, quote, 10 Zug has more blockchain companies than almost anywhere on Earth. In this future, Switzerland becomes the jurisdiction of choice for cryptocurrency exchanges, digital asset management, and data sovereignty. They offer the same services they always have: privacy, security, stability, but for the digital age. The fundamentals haven't changed. Wealthy people and powerful institutions will always need somewhere to park assets, conduct sensitive negotiations, and operate outside their home jurisdiction's prying eyes. Switzerland has been perfecting this business model for 500 years. The product changes: gold, securities, pharma, crypto, but the core service remains the same, providing stability in an unstable world at a premium price.